Welcome back to our channel, where we share updates and untold stories about Catherine, Princess of Wales, and her royal family. Today we bring you some news. Meghan in turmoils after Doria reveals secret war with Meg on TV, not a good girl. Rumor has it that the term free spirit is the one that has broken the last surviving family link that Meghan Markle had. In her most recent Netflix series, she makes use of this term. This image of her mother, Doria Ragland, which at first glance seems to be negative, is now being referred to as a premeditated public rejection instead. A secret communication is the impetus behind Doria's decision to leave the house in California that she and her husband, the Sussexes, own, and to move away from her grandkids. We are now undertaking an inquiry into the potential that two words uttered to the whole world may have been the spark that launched a quiet fight that has left the children of Sussex standing in a world without relatives. This investigation is currently proceeding. Meghan Markle's secret war with the last family she had left, the Montecito rupture, the Montecito rupture, the Montecito rupture. A successful resuscitation of the concept was possible since the circumstances were appropriate. It was the intention of the creators of Meghan Markle's lifestyle series that it would be a show of controlled excellence, aspirational living, and harmonious living within the home. Those with knowledge of the situation claim that the initiative was meticulously crafted with the intention of re-establishing her reputation in the United States. In order to provide a glossy image of her life after leaving the royal family as a mother, entrepreneur, and tastemaker in California, the objective was for it to be the comprehensive and decisive answer to her critiques. In spite of everything, a single two-word description of her mother has, according to many people who are familiar with the family, exposed a long simmering tension, showing a gulf that is deeper than any transatlantic royal disagreement may be. Everything is the case inside this carefully manufactured world. For the mother of a yoga instructor who had been at her daughter's side on a global stage, it was a word of endearment, a kind and bohemian description of the mother. On the surface, the term free spirit seemed to be a manner of expressing affection for the individual. On the other hand, most recent sources from Radar Online indicate that this was not a casual compliment in the world of the Sussexes, which is a society that is very secretive and is subject to intense monitoring. In other words, it was a statement of difference, a subtle but seismic act of separation, and a proclamation of differentiation. According to a source who is very close to the Sussex camp, the phrase was discovered to be anything but accidental. On the face of it, it sounded warm, the insider explained, but among those who know them, it came across as a quiet step back, signaling that Meghan and Doria have very different ideas about parenting and family. Another observer confirmed this interpretation, stating the phrase landed less as praise and more as a subtle point of difference. This was not merely about semantics, it was about narrative control. According to accounts, the description of Doria was a contentious issue inside the production itself, which led to a source of controversy. A television insider who was aware of the series and briefed reporters about it said that the phrase was chosen on purpose. This information was brought to the attention of the reporters. Everyone involved knew that each personal remark would be scrutinized, the source noted, and the language about Meghan's mother drew notice for setting Meghan up as a deliberate, highly organized parent, in contrast to a more free-spirited Doria. The implication was clear. Meghan, the disciplined matriarch, was subtly distinguishing her own controlled, planned-out approach to motherhood from her mother's supposedly more laissez-faire style. It was an attempt at public branding that represented her mother as the other, a kind but fundamentally different and perhaps less rigorous influence on the lives of her children. This portrayal may have been intentional or not, an opportunity for women to break free from the restrictions of the motherhood cage. Because of this public recharacterization, there seems to have been a swift and unambiguous reaction against the individual in question. There have been reports that Doria Ragland, the woman who had been a reliable and soothing presence in the Montecito family in the past, is no longer staying there. After the births of both Archie and Lilibet, she moved in for extended periods of time in order to provide the couple with the hands-on support and family connection that they had been lacking after their difficult separation from the royal family. In the new life that the Sussexes had created for themselves, she was the unspoken foundation that supported everything. She was the one thing that stayed the same, the sole tie to a life before royalty, etiquette, and international debate. She was the only thing that remained the same. But that arrangement, sources insist, has now ended for good. An individual familiar with the household dynamics stated plainly, Doria was once a regular fixture in the household, closely involved in caring for the children with Meghan and Harry. But she is no longer living there, and people around them have taken note. The everyday intimacy, the shared moments of raising children that had once defined their bond, has, according to friends, faded into a more distant and formal relationship. One of the royal biographers and critics, Angela Levin, provides a more candid and disquieting perspective on the relationship that may have been responsible for this breach. She paints a picture that is not of a philosophical dispute about parenting practices, but rather of a fundamental clash between the two parties in terms of their personalities and the amount of expectations they have for one another. Levin provides an answer by stating that Doria is a woman who is quite indifferent to her surroundings. On the other side, it seems that this calm disposition was a factor that conflicted with her daughter's temperament, which was more demanding. As she said, she is interested in going to see her pals, and she enjoys doing yoga sessions. According to Levin, Meghan has been experiencing a great deal of frustration as a result of this circumstance, since she wants her to ensure that she receives exactly what she wants when she notifies her. There is a general consensus that the job of grandmother had developed into something that was far more demanding and required significantly less reciprocation to fulfill. Due to the fact that Doria was no longer a young girl, she found herself in the position of having to deal with the responsibilities of domestic life in a home that was worth a significant amount of money. She felt that they were using her too much, Levin alleges, describing a pattern that consisted of going out, getting her to cook, and going by the shopping. The unrelenting demands of maintaining a home and two small children, which Meghan herself does not want to do, reportedly became difficult for Meghan. She felt that they were using her too much, Levin says. According to this version, Doria was not only a loving grandmother, but she was also an unpaid member of staff who was on call and was expected to be ready at any moment's notice. She was also expected to be available at any certain time. It would seem that the realization that her own survival was dependent on her usefulness was the tipping moment that ultimately led to her reaching her breaking point. Levin said that Meghan became angry with her mother since she did not always show up when she desired her presence, despite the fact that she wanted her. There was a difference of opinion between the two comrades. It is considered that this dynamic is symptomatic of a profound psychological transition that has taken place. Doria, the woman who famously told Oprah Winfrey that the preceding 5 years of her daughter's life had been tough, participated in this retreat. It is possible that Doria is attempting to protect herself by participating in this retreat. In light of the fact that she has successfully navigated the treacherous waters of her daughter's entrance into the most recognized family in the world, and then her sudden departure from the family, it is probable that she has finally reached a personal limit. The Friends of Ragland have refuted the notion that she took direct offense at the comment about the free spirit. However, they have acknowledged that there has been a significant shift in dynamics. One of the friends mentioned that although Doria's self-reliance has long been one of her defining qualities, the comment reopened old sensitivities and came across as an unnecessary tag applied in a very public way. It was possibly the final straw, a public branding that crystallized a private reality that she could no longer tolerate. It is not an act of rage that she left the Montecito home in a tranquil manner. Rather, it may be an indication of tremendous remorse and resignation on her behalf. It involves the establishment of a barrier in a manner that cannot be communicated via the use of words. With respect to the problem of isolation, an approach. There is no such thing as a vacuum in which the supposed gap that exists between Doria Ragland and the questionable person exists. According to a large number of individuals who are critical of the Duchess of Cambridge, this is the unfortunate end to a pattern of behavior that has been characterized by the breaking of relationships. From her father, Thomas Markle, and her half-siblings to the courtiers and servants who left her service, and eventually to the whole British royal family, Meghan's journey has been marked by a series of dramatic and public ruptures. These ruptures have occurred at various points along the way. These ruptures have taken place at a number of different sites located along the path. Having her own mother go, the one person who has been a steady and silent supporter through every storm, completes a picture of profound and seemingly self-imposed seclusion that she has been experiencing. Other people besides her mother have been there for her when she has needed support. According to Angela Levin, this is the natural result of having a personality that is incapable of permitting dissent or departure from her own script. She believes that you cannot escape this effect. She is unable to actually have a good relationship with anyone because she insists on having things done in her own way, Levin explains in a straightforward tone. She is unable to have a healthy connection with anybody. A significant number of her helpers have left her firm because she gets highly annoyed when people do not promptly execute what she wants them to do. This is the reason why she has had a huge number of assistants depart her company. This psychological portrayal of a want for complete control gives a framework that might be used in order to acquire a more comprehensive comprehension of the series of fractures that have marked Meghan's public life. It is of the highest significance that she has the goal of accurately building her own tale, and this goal spans everything from her lifestyle brand to the representation of her own mother. It would seem that any component that does not conform, as well as every individual who does not complete the function that has been assigned to them, has been eliminated from the picture. This is the case. This inclination, which she had previously focused outward against what she referred to as the establishment and the British press, now seemed to have been turned inside, resulting in changes to the connections that she considered to be her closest personal ones. A great number of critics have been quick to point out that the tragedy has a far broader scope than the relationship that occurs between a mother and her child. In the here and now, it has an immediate and direct impact on the lives of her two children, Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet, at this very time. This is something that Levin expresses with a sense of exasperation. The thing that genuinely hurts me is that now the children have no family, not one, in fact, not a single family. It is clear that this will have a significant impact on their growth, and the implications are stunning. In spite of the fact that they were raised in the vast but abandoned enclave of Montecito, it has been said that they are now cut off from both sides of their family tree. When it comes to their father's side of the family, they have a grandfather who is the King of England, an uncle who will one day take the throne, and other relatives with whom they ought to be sharing a unique and historic destiny. Nevertheless, they are practically entirely unfamiliar with each and every one of these unique people. It would seem that the one grandma on their mother's side who was able to establish a solid and loving bond with them has been pushed to the periphery of their life throughout this period of time. The fact that they are members of a complex American family and the descendants of royalty does not change the reality that they do not belong to either of these groups. They have their life documented for Netflix specials and public appearances, which allows them to live in a gilded bubble. But they do not have the messy, spontaneous, and significant interactions that come with having a bigger family network. It is probable that Levin's negative assessment, which asserts that they spent their Christmas in pajamas because nobody wanted to visit them, is exaggerated. Yet it tackles a more fundamental and extremely emotional aspect about their way of life, which is that they live alone. The most fundamental amenities that the outside world has to offer are not only being withheld from them, but they are also being shielded from the outside world. Across the Atlantic Ocean, there is a war that is going on in silence. A new kind of war was taking place on the other side of the Atlantic, and it was one that was marked by quiet rather than words throughout the struggle. In California, the drama around Meghan's mother's link was taking place at the same time that this fight was taking place in their respective states. The birthday of Catherine, the Princess of Wales, has the potential to become the next battlefield in the confrontation between the Sussexes and the monarchy, which is still going on despite the fact that the Cold War between the two groups is still going on. Throughout the course of the day, royal circles began to buzz with the surprising news that Harry and Meghan had not spoken with one another in any manner. In the highly symbolic realm of royal relations, where the sending or withholding of public birthday greetings is a strong diplomatic instrument, this was a deliberate act of disengagement on the part of the individual. A palace source confirmed the deliberate nature of the silence, calling it a clear message that they are done. It is a line in the sand. This was not a simple oversight. Rather, it was a deliberate act of disengagement. The reporter Rob Shooter stated that the Sussexes did not lift a finger. No card, no text, no email, nothing. These statements were made by the palace. As far as strategic communication is concerned, the response that the Princess of Wales offered was pretty successful. Rather than becoming embroiled in the difficult issue, Kensington Palace decided to develop a film that was contemplative and quiet instead of getting involved. It showed Catherine walking alone in the Berkshire countryside, a picture of quiet contemplation, speaking of finding stillness, patience, and quiet consideration, even in the coldest, darkest season. A source close to the princess told Shooter this was not about fanfare, but about her claiming her own peace. It was a message sent without words, a powerful counter-narrative to the Sussexes' brand of public grievance. An additional source termed it as a quiet power maneuver, hence calling attention to the considerable divide that exists between the two sides. She was rising above everything and choosing peace over conflict, while they were going through family issues and public relations clashes. The message was clear and unmistakable. She was choosing peace over competition. Kate is calm, grounded, and going on with her life, in contrast to the Sussexes, who continue to vent their frustrations in the media. An individual who is close to Harry and Meghan provided a different viewpoint, stating that there was no intentional snub. This individual stated that their silence was an expression of respect for what she had gone through, a gesture that was intended to give Catherine space after she had experienced significant health issues. This was something that was to be expected. In contrast, this idea had a hard time acquiring traction in the court of public opinion over the course of its development. The history of the public pronouncements made by the Sussexes, starting with the interview with Oprah and continuing with Harry's memoir, Spare, has resulted in a great degree of suspicion toward the Sussexes. A great number of individuals saw their declaration that they respected the right of others to privacy as a simple method of recasting how they behaved as confrontational. It was like night and day, said one witness, describing the contrast between the two. The many public fights that the Sussexes were involved in only served to strengthen the image of a dignified future queen and a perennially dissatisfied couple living in exile. Catherine's controlled reflection stood in stark contrast to these ongoing public disputes. Angela Levin seemed to disregard as meaningless the idea that Catherine had any kind of emotional distress as a result of the rejection. She said, "If I am being really truthful, I do not think Catherine gave a damn about us even if she did care about us. It is something that I feel would make her very glad that they did not say anything, because I can imagine that if they did say anything, it would contain some sort of horrible little phrase in some way. The fact that they refrained from saying anything is something that I believe would. An act of civil war that the palace may not be aware of." At precisely the moment when the narrative of a calm and cherished Princess of Wales seemed to be gaining momentum, the British press, and more specifically the Daily Mail, began a bizarre and aggressive reaction. An unexpected source was the origin of this counterattack, using phrases such as nicely swaddled in Holland Cooper tweed and wafting in a winter wonderland to describe the princess was something that she deemed to be tone-deaf and out of touch. In a scathing column, journalist Liz Jones criticized Catherine's birthday video, calling it a misfire that smacks of something Meghan and Harry might come up with. Jones referred to the video as a misfire. Jones argued that the video demonstrated that the royal family has come unstuck at a time when ordinary Britons are experiencing difficulties such as unemployment and unemployment. Her statement that the tape was far worse than the famed fly-on-the-wall footage of the royal family at home from 1969 was an example of the remarkable exaggeration that she engaged in. On account of the fact that the assault was both so personal and so excessive, it left many spectators astonished and wondering about the real genesis of the attack. According to the findings of the research conducted by Outspoken, the basis of this enmity is not only the viewpoint of a single journalist who happens to be on the opposing side of the controversial topic. A proxy attack, sometimes known as a volley fired in a secret civil war that is now taking place inside the boundaries of Buckingham Palace itself, is the idea that has been proposed to explain anything. According to this viewpoint, the communications team of King Charles, which is led by his secretary Tobin Andre, who was a former executive at the same newspaper company that published the assault, believes that the enormous popularity of the Prince and Princess of Wales poses a direct threat to the king's rule. This opinion is based on the fact that Tobin Andre was a former executive at the same newspaper company. In the course of the program, the presenter made the allegation that Charles's staff saw Catherine and William as a possible threat to the organization. It is this incendiary accusation that reframes the entire royal drama. They are at war with Catherine and William. It gives the impression that the monarchy is not a unified institution that is weathering the storm of the Sussexes, but rather a broken organization, with the king's court actively seeking to undermine his successor. This accusation is what reframes the entire royal drama. Since the foundation of the monarchy itself, people have been thinking about the possibility of a war of the courts. Throughout the course of history, the court of the heir, which is often referred to as the rising sun, has sometimes eclipsed that of the monarch who is now in power, which has led to jealousy and intrigue. The severe and public conflict that took place between Charles and Diana in the 1990s, known as the War of the Waleses, may serve as a current example of this kind of internal conflict. The two of them engaged in conflict with one another via the use of conflicting media briefings and television appearances. It is stated that King Charles is very sensitive to the danger of being overshadowed by his son and daughter-in-law, who are younger, more glamorous, and more popular than he is. This is because King Charles has waited for the throne for more than 70 years. A high-stakes game of power and public perception is being played out in this setting, and the attacks that the media are committing on Catherine are not random acts of journalism. Rather, they are premeditated moves in the game. Reports indicate that the king's own staff is allegedly responsible for arranging these assaults. The purpose of these attacks is to ensure that the Queen continues to be the focus of attention while simultaneously diminishing the importance of the Waleses. If that turns out to be true, then this is a revelation that is of tremendous significance. It suggests that the most important threat to the stability of the House of Windsor does not emerge from an unhappy son in California, but rather from inside the sovereign's own intimate circle of friends and family. The organization seems to be involved in a struggle on two fronts, and the conflict for its future is being waged not only beyond the Atlantic Ocean, but also inside the walls of the palace itself. It would appear that the organization is engaged in war on both fronts. Thank you for watching the video. Please let us know your thoughts, and goodbye for now.